So the bees are just working their way into the candy there. I can see I've got a good deal of honey. I'm going to put this sugar brick here and this one here. This hive has got plenty of resources, and I think we're going to go. The cluster's just here. Just eating the winter patties I'd put there in the winter time. There's still plenty of honey in the frames below. Have everything ready so we don't have to open it for longer than necessary. And there's a cluster, nice sized cluster there, eating up the food nicely. Put a bit of extra in there just to make sure it can go a nice long time. And close it up. They look in great shape. So the position of the cluster can vary quite a bit. In this hive, the cluster is still low. In this hive, the cluster is higher. But in any case, the cluster is in contact, physical contact, with plenty of food in the hive. These hives certainly did not need that extra food adding, and by lifting it, I could tell they still had plenty of weight. So they still, a good 60 pounds of weight in there, so they would not be in any danger of running out of food till probably March. But for the sake of the video, I'm opening up, putting that food in, and I probably won't have to touch these for the rest of the winter, but we'll see. It's been a very mild winter, but just right in my view, because it's been cold enough that the bees aren't flying, and it's not been bitterly cold, at least not yet. When it's warm enough for the bees to fly, they burn up a lot more honey. So we have to be very careful about the supply of food running down. When it's really cold, they'll burn up a lot more honey as well. So, but it's been right in between. It's sort of hitting round about the 30 to 35 degree mark. A few bees have flown around each day, but the clusters stayed intact. And my personal opinion is that would use just about the minimum amount of honey in the winter. So right now they're not getting through the honey very quickly. Today is the first day of spring, and for a change it actually feels like the first day of spring. Just come and have a look. These are all over the pollen feeder, which I'm going to reload, and the sugar syrup feeder. Let's look at the activity. You're looking at these two hives, interesting opportunity. The hive on the left is using predominantly the upper entrance. The hive on the right is predominantly using the lower entrance, although it's also using the upper entrance. To me, this means that the hive on the left has used more of its food resources than the hive on the right. The hive on the right has a cluster nearer to the bottom of that hive, and you'll often see that in different colonies. This hive here is the option of going in at the bottom or at the top. You see there's hardly any bees going in at the top, but lots going in at the bottom. So they probably hardly touched that upper brood chamber full of honey. Likewise, well, with this one, they probably used a lot of that food resources and they're using the top entrance. So things are looking good. My objective today is to go around. I'm going to put pollen patties in where I can here. I'm going to top up these feeders, make sure they don't run out. We've got about a week of days in the 50s coming up. Absolutely perfect conditions to boost those overwintered colonies. I've used the majority of the pollen substitute in here. I'm going to give them some more. I'm doing here is I'm putting this flexible inner cover on in order to force the bees down into the frames rather than clustering up here in the empty space. So by pushing them down with a very lightweight inner cover, forces those bees to go down into the frames. And this way, feeding that pollen, they'll be getting comb warm, which will be allowing brood rearing to take place, which is the whole point. This is what I want to stop happening, all this clustering up here in the empty space. That's what I'm looking to avoid. So it's a nice warm day. Those bees will make it down into there pretty well. It's spring now, and if you've been following my videos, you've been seeing that I've been checking some of the yards for the development state and whether the hives are ready to have brood chambers reversed, have insulation taken off, or in the case of single hive bodies, having another deep super put on. So what I wanted to do today was more explain the two ways that I am managing my colonies this spring, with single brood chambers and with double brood chambers. At least they're coming through the winter that way. And what I have to do now is get everything up to double brood chambers, at least when the conditions are right and when the hive is ready to be converted to that state. Because single brood chamber management isn't just about keeping the bees locked in the bottom box. For me, it's having them in 2 brood chambers for part of the year and 1 brood chamber for the other part of the year. The other thing you have to remember is my priority in the spring is to produce lots of bees so I can split the colonies to make hundreds of nukes this spring. So I have a slightly different priority to every other beekeeper who may be looking to simply produce as much honey as possible. So you can bear that in mind when you look at the things that I'm doing here. But hopefully today, this yard will be something like my Winterport yards and Monroe yard I've just been to. 3 out of the 4 yards that I've checked through at the moment were ready for the colonies to expand from the current overwintering condition that they're at. I'm hoping that this yard is one of those. So we'll have a look. Okay, so in this pallet we have single brood chamber colony, who I would hope that I can expand it, if not now, in another week or 2. And I'll check some of these other colonies which have a single and say a medium or 2 deeps here. So we'll have a look in there and then see how things are going. The singles, I had made sure I was feeding just in case things were light. I was being a little bit paranoid about not having enough food in my hives. This is looking promising already, so I'm going to move the camera closest to I could ask for. Okay, so let's open this up. I can tell already that this is going to be a good strong colony ready for a deep super. And I have some help with me today.
Hey,
Cameron.
I'm Cameron. I'm from Husson University. I'm here learning how to beekeep.
So Cameron's going to give me a hand today. Cameron, can you make sure that's in the, everything's in the shot here? Okay. Now, what we have a lot of built up comb in that area, so we're going to scrape that off. And Cameron, do I have another one of those, an empty one of those in the back of the truck? Did I bring another one of these empty tubs, which I was supposed to do? I don't think I did. It's okay, we'll collect it later. Take off some of the sugar block. That's okay, we'll collect this stuff up separately, Cameron. Yesterday when I was doing it, I brought a bucket to put these things in. That's a good idea. Yeah. That way there's no excuses. Okay. Pretty cleaned up now. Okay, so I can see right here I've got brood in at least 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 5, possibly more. Plenty of honey in this frame, and this frame. And the honey is being removed from the middle here, so the cluster's probably brood on this frame also. I'm going to take this screw is right in the way. Take the insulation off. I'm pretty certain we're going to be roosting the brood chambers, or adding another brood chamber in the case of this single. What we're going to do here is check. The best way to tell whether the cluster occupies, what I've been saying before, we need to have a big cluster and a good weather forecast with warmish nights coming up to take the colony from a single brood chamber to add a second, or from reversing the brood chambers and moving the top brood chamber down to the bottom, because they're going to lose a lot of heat that they weren't losing before when they had a cover and insulation and that sort of thing on the top. So we're going to change those thermal dynamics, so we have to make sure the cluster can withstand that problem. One is the weather forecast, two is the amount of bees we have in here. And the best way to tell how many bees you've got is not by looking at the top, but by looking from underneath, because they can be very misleading at the top. There we go. Well, there is certainly a lot of honey in here. This still weighs a good 40-50 pounds. And this is still full of bees. Can you tell if the images got all of this?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Good. So we have bees in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those 9 seams. So this box is really full of bees. They're even extending the brood chamber down below with the drone brood here. So things are going very nicely. In fact, they've got drone queen cups here, which is a sign that they are really packing the area up. Queen cups don't mean anything unless there's an egg there or they're starting to extend it, but it's always a precursor to a swarm queen cell. So this is certainly big enough, looking from the number of bees here, for me to reverse the brood chamber.
So you want me to go grab one?
Yes, please. And also bearing in mind the weight here, a lot of the frames that the bees are currently don't have brood in, they can't occupy because it's full of honey. So we've got so much honey in here that they can't expand outwards. They're going to have to be able to expand upwards. But first we're going to have a quick look at the brood chamber, because we're beekeepers and everyone wants to see inside the brood chamber. So there'll be honey in this frame. And there's lots of it. You could tell by the weight anyway. Honey here, bit of pollen. Yeah, plenty of honey. They're eating up the honey on this side, so the cluster's getting all the way over to here. Lots of pollen. We've had a really good pollen flow now that the weather has warmed up. So now really the natural protein sources are coming in. So now they're virtually not touching the dry pollen substitute I'm offering them. But I will be giving them pollen substitute as a supplement in the hive in case the weather does turn bad in the coming days. But look at all that pollen. This frame is almost totally filled with pollen. And all the different colors of pollen are from different types of flower. So by seeing a variety of colors in there, we're getting a variety of amino acids in those proteins. So we've got some good nutrition coming into that colony, which is exactly what you want for a colony building up brood rapidly. Now we're into the brood chamber proper. And look at that, wall-to-wall capped brood, be emerging soon. In fact, they're just starting to emerge here. This is one recently emerged. Here's a newly emerged bee, but the cells are starting to open up. So this frame is going to start emerging today. Just starting to emerge in the middle of this side of the frame as well. Remember, one frame like this, full of brood, when the bees emerge, will cover 2, maybe 3 frames of bees. Because there's a good 4,000 to 5,000 young bees emerging from these cells over the next few days. And another frame quite like it, a little less advanced, because we have some open larvae here. So these are a little bit younger. These will probably be emerging within a week or so. Likewise here, these ones are older, the older part of the brood nest, but the brood nest has been extended all the way over to here now. Some younger larvae here. So these two will be emerging over in about a week's time. That's 2 full frames of brood, and here's a 3rd full frame of brood. Again, all capped brood starting to emerge in the middle. And likewise on this side, really good solid amount of brood, some 8-day-old larvae here. So this will probably be emerging in a week's time, whereas on this side it looks more like they will be emerging, within the week. That's 3 frames of capped brood, 4 frames of capped brood. This is a little bit younger, plenty of open brood with white, brilliant white larvae. The bright white cappings, if you see larvae, you always want to see them bright white, and they want to look wet because they're being fed well. They're surrounded by open cells of liquid, which is nectar, or in this case sugar syrup, and lots of pollen. So a perfect sort of bullseye of brood of varying ages working their way out, lots of pollen, lots of wet open nectar, and then even some honey still capped in the corners here. 4 full frames of brood. And the 5th frame of brood just developing here. These are all full of eggs. Eggs and very young larvae here. Queen's been laying here, with pollen and nectar or sugar syrup out here. Likewise, pollen up here. And more eggs on this side of the comb as well. And all the way over to here. So 4 frames of advanced brood and 1 frame of very young brood. The queen's been laying on this frame as well. There's some young brood just developing here. So this is probably the edge of the brood comb here, the brood chamber, and the queen will be working her way over here further, and then the next 2 frames are honey. So we've got 5 frames of brood here coming along nicely. The bees occupy 9 or 10 of the frames right now. This is definitely ready to add another super onto it. Weather forecast is good. The bees are ready for it. You notice we didn't see the queen in this visit. She may have been there, we might spot her on the video later, but we don't have to see the queen when we open up the hive. We saw eggs, and if we have eggs, that means the queen was certainly laying here within the last 3 days. So there's nothing to worry about, we just move on. So we'll put a pollen patty on here in the event that the weather deteriorates and the bees can't get out to forage, and then we'll put another super on. Thanks, Cameron. So, extra pollen substitute
Right over the top.
and we're going to put that on.
Now this one's going on the top versus swapping them, or?
That's right. So what will going to happen is the cluster is down below. The heat is being generated down below, and now what it's going to do is warm up these frames up here. The way we have these top frames laid out is we've got frames of foundation or only partially drawn out comb up here, and the outer two are foundation here, outer two are foundation here. Then we've got frames of honey. Bees are already starting to move up into there. So this is honey from a dead out that the bees are moving into. So that's the resources for the new brood chamber that we want the queen to start expand up into here. And then we have lots of drawn comb that were built last year, and we want the bees to come up. They'll be up here, they'll be cleaning these frames within the next few hours, and I'll bet the queen is laying up here by tomorrow. When we come back here in 2 weeks' time, these 4 frames are going to be full of brood. I wouldn't be surprised to find brood in this frame and this frame, because remember, we've got 4 frames of brood probably going to hatch in the next week. That means enough bees in there to cover 8 more frames, and they're already covering 9 frames here right now. So this whole area is going to be full of bees within a couple of weeks. That's going to put this hive in a prime position for me to split. Either just take a nuke off, or to split it to make several nukes. And we'll talk about that in future videos. But that's what we do initially. If I was leaving this for honey production, this colony is growing so quickly that I would need to thin this colony out before the honey flow started, because there's going to be so many bees in here, I would be in danger of it swarming. But also, bear in mind, my priority is to produce brood to sell nukes, so I'll be thinning them out in order to sell nukes, not just to stop them swarming. But the two objectives tie in nicely. That hive is done, ready to move on to another one.
Insulation's going back on because of the weather.
I'm going to put the insulation back on. Yeah, there's no point in not having it. I've got it right here. It's not in the way, so we'll keep that on there. Oh, sorry, we won't bother with that insulation. I'm sorry, I meant the roof insulation.
Now I understand.
Okay. And that was the cover for this hive, wasn't it?
No, I grabbed that from the truck.
Okay. We had a bucket on here, didn't we? We may as well. They've still got plenty of syrup in the bucket, so what the heck? We'll give it to them. Pour a bit down there, and that's good to go. This stuff can go on that feeder over there.
Okay.
Bees here too. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. So on this hive, we've got a deep white super there, and then a medium super on top of it. Now, from what I can see here, this medium super is full of bees, full of brood, and this was probably here just to stop robbing or something like that. Take it off here. There's a little hole here. That's why that goes on. Could you pass me the smoker, please, Cameron? Just puff a bit of smoke on there. Pump hard. That's good. Now, when you're selling nukes, you need the bees in deep frames. I do sell some of my nukes with medium frames, so if anyone ever wants a nuke with medium frames, let me know. These are the sort of hives I'd make my nukes of medium frames out of, but vast majority will be in deep frames, so I have to have the deep super fully occupied with brood. Now, this has still got quite a bit of honey. And I can tell it's fully occupied with bees already. So first of all, we're going to reverse the brood chamber here. The fact that I'm using a deep and a medium for your typical beekeeper, the reversing process is exactly the same principles. You don't want to reverse it unless you've got a big cluster and the weather forecast is right. And I know the weather forecast is good. This is full of bees, so this is going to go onto the bottom. The big question is, how much of this deep super is already occupied? Because if I'm really lucky, I can reverse the brood chambers and expand this colony. Let's have a look. So, from the top, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 frames, 9 seams full of bees. But what's it like underneath? Not the same. So here, we've only got bees in 1, 2, 3, 4 seams. So this cluster hasn't expanded fully yet. I've got lots of empty space here that cluster can expand into. So we're going to put this on the top, and we're going to put pollen patty on the bottom. So when I lift this up, Cameron, would you mind putting the blue super in its place? Lift and pull it towards you one end. Yeah, I could say. Okay, and we'll put a pollen patty in there, please.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
That's good. So, what I know now with this super, what I know is that I am not ready to put another super up the top here yet, because there's plenty of expansion room around here and probably over here for that matter. The bees are fully occupying 4 or 5 of the frames. I don't need to go in and see every single frame here. I saw enough just by the position of the bees to tell me we've got a big cluster of bees with brood here. That's going to be warming up all the rest of the space, and they've got room to expand into here for the next week or so. But I wouldn't be surprised if I can come back here in a week to 10 days and put another deep super on here and have it expand into a 3rd brood box. I've got some holes here. I'll cover that with duct tape, I think. Don't want it to be more drafty than need be.
You want me to nail those back on?
These are going to go back on there. Yeah. Stop the draft there.
Do you want the guard back there?
I'm sorry?
Did you want this guard back on?
No, we'll just take that off altogether. That's fine. So, this is all we need to do for reversing this particular brood chamber. And we'll have a look at the next ones. Oh, that's full of bees. So despite my efforts trying to keep the bees down here, they're already clustering up here. That's an indication that we have a lot of bees in this box. Instead of putting the screws into the rims in this yard, I put them into the hives, which I won't do anymore. Okay. Again, in this hive, we've got a deep, and in this case, it's a shallow, or is it a medium? It might be a shallow, which may be why more crowded. This hive is slightly smaller than the other one because I'm using a shallow instead of a medium for the honey, well, for the second brood chamber.
Give them a quick smell.
Please. Get right on the bees. There you go. There you go. Okay, I can see honey, 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 brood, 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 open space, honey. So we've still got plenty of resources in the hive. Fully occupied by bees. We're going to reverse this brood chamber also. But I can see that this is not full of bees down below here. We've got honey, honey, and I've got brood developing in these 4 or 5 frames. So all we're going to do is again reverse this brood chamber. Yes, please. And I'll let you put the entrance, reduce the entrance again there, Cameron. And that's all we really need to do with this hive. We're exactly the same as the other. Not quite big enough for a 3rd brood chamber. This is actually a proper double 2-story hive, 2 deep. Plenty of bees up top. So, appears to be lots of bees there. I'm not going to go through the brood chambers there. I'll have a look at it from below. In the spring, those hives should be really well glued together. It's not been open for months. And as we can see, we have bees in some bees. So the cluster is right across this hive. Certainly looks well occupied and down below as well. But we'll see just how fully occupied it is. Is the camera pointing down at this super as well?
I can point it down a bit more.
Just a little more, please. Nice to have somebody that can move the camera for me while I'm playing with the bees.
That's why I'm here.
We have drone brood here, exposed, so it's always worth having a look, see if we see any mites. And although we're only looking at half a dozen larvae there, I don't see any mites, which is always encouraging. And look at that. Not only is the top box full of bees, but the bottom box is full of bees too. Might be hard to see with this light, but that is 2 stories of bees absolutely packed to the gills. So 2 deeps full of bees. This is going to be a hive which is going to have an additional deep put on it. There's pretty much no point in reversing the brood chamber here because they're already occupying this one. So there's no point in rearranging things for them. They're expanding up or downwards as fast as they could. This is, remember, we're only talking about being at the 11th of April and I've got 2 deeps full of bees. So we're going to put a pollen patty in here. We're going to get another super.
Okay.
Or another deep super and put it on. I'm going to use a bit of smoke so I don't crush my bees.
So this one go on the top then, or?
That's going to end up on the top, yeah. So this deep is going on here. Oh, still got quite a bit of honey in it. Brood chamber is expanding nicely into here. And now we're going to keep the brood chamber expanding. We'll even put another pollen patty in, why not? And we'll put that on there. So, what's happened is the cluster started off down here in the fall, and it's worked its way up into the second deep, eating about half the honey. It is still about half full of honey. It still weighs a good 30 to 40 pounds. But the cluster's already brewed in here, but we've given them even more room here because 20 frames of bees we've got in here. here right now. So they're going to expand into here, and the brood chamber is going to be 3 supers deep in here for a short while. When I come back here in a couple of weeks, I'll be splitting it down basically all the way down to 1 box when I make multiple nukes out of this hive. So again up top we have 2 frames of foundation, frame of honey, drawn empty comb, another frame of honey, and 2 more frames of foundation. So do you want to just close that one up now, please, Cameron? So what we have in this yard is equal to my yards in Winterport. They are, and that's probably because I went into this yard first with pollen patties. I went into my Winterport and Monroe yards next with pollen patties, and I went into my own backyard with pollen patties last. And so it took me about a week to get around all the yards, and that may account for why the yard at my house was about a week behind the other yards. So what we have now is colonies developing at least 2 weeks ahead of what I would say they do on a typical spring. We've had very warm weather, which has really helped allow the colonies to explode in population, and I just hope I brought enough supers with me again to make sure that we can give them room for the expansion that they are doing so well so quickly. I hope you found that helpful. I hope it explains why I'm putting an extra super on even what I would typically call a single brood chamber colony, an extra brood chamber on it. So I will also explain this in multiple times in other videos. I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. See you next time. Am I putting